The alien coalition had been planning for years, watching Earth from the shadows, whispering to one another that humanity was dangerous if left to grow too strong, but still weak enough to crush if they acted quickly. Dozens of species, each with their own fleets of shining warships and dark ambitions, gathered near the contested stars. They believed this would be the final war, the one that would end humanity before it ever truly began to rise. In their minds, humans were nothing more than fragile beings, soft-bodied and short-lived, armed with ships that were primitive compared to the massive plasma-armed cruisers of the coalition. To them, humans were prey, and predators always destroyed prey before it grew teeth. Yet what none of them understood, what none of them even suspected, was that a human already walked among them. His name was Daniel Cross, and for years he had hidden in plain sight, wearing the disguise of an alien, serving as one of their own officers. He had learned their languages, studied their mannerisms, and even earned their trust. No one questioned him. No one ever thought that the quiet, observant figure aboard their fleets was secretly the very enemy they all sought to destroy. Daniel was calm, careful, and patient. Patience was a weapon as sharp as any blade, and he wielded it better than any general. While the coalition believed they were planning the destruction of humanity, Daniel had been planning their downfall. Every time he walked through the towering halls of alien ships, every time he stood on the command deck of their war machines, he gathered more information, routes, weaknesses, codes, and battle strategies. He carried it all with him, waiting for the day he could use it to save Earth. The War Council was preparing to send their fleets forward, and the atmosphere across the armadas was filled with excitement. Alien soldiers sharpened their blades and charged their rifles. Engineers whispered proudly about the firepower of their ships, plasma lances that could melt a battleship in seconds, disruptors that could rip holes in shields. They believed there was no chance of failure. To them, humanity's colonies would burn, its soldiers would die, and Earth itself would kneel beneath their claws and fangs. But Daniel knew better. He knew the heart of his people. He knew that humanity had always been underestimated, not only by aliens but even by one another. Earth had been dismissed countless times in its own history, yet each time, humans had risen stronger. He had seen it in the way humans could endure hunger, storms and war never truly breaking. He carried that fire in his heart as he walked silently among the coalition fleets. Sometimes late at night, he would stand at the viewport of the alien battleship and look out into the endless stars. His reflection showed the alien face he wore, as a mask, but in his mind he remembered Earth's skies, the blue oceans, and the green forests. He remembered the laughter of children, the determination of soldiers, the stubbornness of farmers, and the brilliance of scientists. Humanity was not perfect, but it was strong in ways that no alien could ever understand. That was why he fought. That was why he risked his life every single day, pretending to be one of the enemy. The coalition thought they had the upper hand, but they were blind to the simplest truth. Their arrogance was their weakness. They had gathered dozens of fleets, but those fleets were filled with distrust. Species that had hated each other for centuries now stood side by side, pretending to be allies only because they shared a common enemy. Daniel saw the cracks in their unity, the arguments between captains, the contempt in their eyes when orders were given. They thought they were unstoppable, but he knew that if pushed in the right way, the coalition would collapse into chaos. And Daniel intended to be that push. Every word spoken in the grand halls of war, every new weapon tested, every new strategy, whispered between generals, he memorized it all. He was a shadow moving between giants, small and unnoticed, yet holding a power none of them realized. He was the dagger they had already welcomed into their hearts. As the fleets prepared to move, the alien commanders laughed about how easy it would be. Some even placed wagers on how long Earth's defenses would last. They joked about who would take the first human slaves, who would burn the first cities, and who would be remembered as the one to destroy Earth. To them, this war was already won. But Daniel Cross stood among them, silent and steady, his human heart beating faster with every cruel word. He knew that when the time came, their laughter would turn to screams. He had waited too long, risked too much to let humanity fall. The storm was gathering. The fleets were ready. The galaxy believed humanity was about to die. Yet hidden in the shadows, already standing at the heart of the enemy, was a single human who would change everything. One man, carrying the weight of his species on his shoulders, surrounded by enemies who never suspected the truth. Every alien sought humanity's death, but they had already let a human walk among them, and that mistake would cost them more than they could ever imagine. Daniel Cross had lived under an alien face for so long that even he sometimes forgot the sound of his true voice. He walked through the metallic corridors of the battleship Xerolon as if he belonged there, his steps steady, his posture calm, his eyes never lingering too long. Around him, alien crew members of different shapes and colors moved with purpose, checking power conduits, adjusting weapons arrays, and running reports for the officers. To them, Daniel was just another one of their kind, another loyal officer in service of the Coalition fleet. None of them suspected that behind the disguise of flesh and technology beat the heart of a human. The Xerolon was a monster of a ship, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length, its hull plated with black alloy that shimmered faintly against the light of nearby stars. It carried weapons that could annihilate small fleets on its own. Plasma lances capable of slicing ships in half, void disruptors that could tear through shields, and hangars filled with strike craft like swarms of angry insects waiting to be unleashed. To the Coalition, the Xerolon was a symbol of their dominance, proof that no human ship could hope to match their strength. To Daniel, it was both a prison and a weapon he intended to turn against them. The crew respected him. He was quiet, dependable, and always seemed to know the right solution to a problem. When systems flickered, he was the first to stabilize them. When engines sputtered, he had the right commands to keep them running. His calm nature earned him a place of trust, something most outsiders never achieved in a Coalition fleet filled with suspicion. That trust was his greatest weapon, for it allowed him access to parts of the ship and information no human spy should ever have seen. Among the crew was an officer named Lyra, a young alien whose bright eyes often searched for meaning beyond the orders of her commanders. She was tall and slender, her skin carrying a faint shimmer of silver under the glow of the ship's lights. Unlike others, she did not laugh when officers spoke about the weakness of humans. She did not cheer at the thought of burning Earth's colonies. Instead, she studied Daniel with curiosity. She admired his discipline, the way he carried himself as though unshaken by fear or arrogance. To her, he seemed different, though she could not yet see why. Daniel kept his distance from her, though he noticed her gaze more than once. In the silence of the ship's long voyages, her questions were dangerous. He had lived too long in this role to let anyone come too close. Still, there were moments when he caught her staring out of the viewport, her expression heavy, as if she too doubted the righteousness of their mission. He lived carefully, each day a balance between survival and discovery. He studied every order that passed through the Xerolon's command deck. He memorized fleet movements, weapon placements, and secret protocols. With every scrap of information, he built a map in his mind, a map that would one day lead to humanity's survival. He knew the names of Coalition admirals, the codes of their encrypted channels, and the weaknesses in their vast fleets. No spy had ever carried so much knowledge, and no spy had ever been so deeply buried inside the heart of the enemy. But the longer he stayed, the heavier the burden became. Each time the Xerolon passed by a human colony, Daniel had to remain silent, watching from behind alien eyes as ships prepared to strike. He clenched his fists behind his back, forcing himself to endure, to wait for the right moment. Acting too soon would mean failure. Acting at the wrong time would mean Earth's destruction. So he kept his secret, even as the flames of anger and grief burned hotter within him. The Coalition crew had no idea. They joked about humans, called them fragile, mocked their short lives. They compared Earth's ships to floating wrecks, laughing about how easy the war would be. Daniel smiled, with them when he had to, nodding along, playing the role of a loyal officer. But inside, every insult was fuel. Every arrogant word reminded him of why he was there, why he endured the loneliness of pretending to be something he was not. At night, when his duties ended, Daniel sat alone in his quarters, the hum of the ship surrounding him. He removed his disguise in secret just enough to see his human face reflected in the mirror. His jaw was sharper, his skin different, his eyes tired but fierce. It was the only reminder he had of who he truly was. He whispered the name Earth softly to himself, a promise that he had not forgotten. On some nights, Lyra passed his quarters and paused as if she could sense the shadow of something hidden within him. She never knocked, never asked questions, but the way her footsteps lingered told him she felt there was more to him than the mask he wore. Daniel prepared for the day when she might discover his secret, knowing that moment could either doom him or save him. The Xerolon continued to move with the Coalition fleet, a giant among giants, a predator ready to devour. To the galaxy, it was unstoppable. To Daniel, it was a ticking blade, one he planned to turn at the perfect moment. He knew he could not stop the war alone, but he could bend its path. One ship, one sabotage, one whispered command at the right moment could change everything, and so he waited, silent among them, a single human hidden in the heart of the enemy's greatest warship. Every day was a risk, every word a gamble. But Daniel Cross had not come this far to fail. The aliens thought they were hunting humanity, but they carried a human inside their own ranks, a spark of Earth hidden in plain sight, ready to ignite. When the time was right, the aliens believed humans were weak because they only saw the surface. They saw fragile bodies, short lives, and ships that looked simple compared to the shining monsters of the Coalition fleet. They thought Earth had nothing more than a few scattered colonies and defenses that would break in the first real strike. To them, humanity was prey pretending to be a predator. But Daniel Cross knew the truth, and it was a truth that would one day shatter their arrogance. Humanity had a past filled with battles. Earth was not a peaceful cradle of innocence. It was a world forged in wars. Nations had fought across oceans. Men and women had struggled through centuries of fire, and humanity had learned again and again how to rise from ashes. Every war left scars, but also lessons. Daniel remembered the history lessons from his childhood, stories of ancient wars, great revolutions, and desperate fights for survival. Unlike the aliens who relied on technology and arrogance, humanity relied on something else: endurance. The aliens did not know about the hidden warships. Long ago, when Earth first sent ships into the stars, there were fears of invasion. Engineers, working in secret, had built massive vessels, dreadnoughts larger than anything the world had seen. They were hidden in the asteroid belts where no scanners searched, cloaked in silence and waiting for a call. Many thought these ships were just myths, old projects abandoned when peace treaties were signed. But Daniel knew they were real. His father had once been part of the team that worked on them. He remembered hearing whispers of the giants sleeping in the dark, machines so powerful they could rip apart an armada. And there were more secrets. Old shipyards, abandoned to the eyes of outsiders, were not abandoned at all. They were hidden under the dust of moons and the shadows of planets. Inside, engineers still worked, repairing forgotten cruisers, sharpening weapons, and running silent drills. Humanity never truly stopped preparing. They had seen the stars and known that someday someone would come to test them. Earth's silence was not weakness, it was patience. Daniel carried part of that secret with him, locked in the device on his wrist. To the aliens, it looked like nothing more than a standard communication band, but deep within it was an encryption, so strong no alien mind could break it. It held coordinates, blueprints, and codes, the keys to humanity's hidden strength. If he could ever return home or even send the signal safely, the hidden fleets would rise again. Humanity would not stand alone with old frigates and weak defenses. They would meet the Coalition with dreadnoughts and battleships that the galaxy had never seen. Sometimes Daniel lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling of the alien battleship, and he thought of Earth's secret fleets. He pictured the massive cannons charging, the shields lighting up, the dreadnoughts moving slowly like giants waking from centuries of sleep. He imagined the shock on alien faces when they realized humanity had been holding back. It gave him strength to keep going, to keep pretending he was one of them. He also remembered the stories of old human commanders, Men and women who stood against impossible odds, who refused to kneel even when entire nations burned. That was humanity's greatest weapon, the one no alien scanner could measure: willpower. Other species might break when their fleets shattered, but humans would keep fighting. Even a child on Earth would pick up a stone if no other weapon remained. Daniel knew this truth, and he carried it with pride. The Coalition had no idea what they were waking. In their greed, they thought they would end a weak species. Instead, they were calling forth something far older and stronger than they realized. Humanity had always fought to survive, and now survival meant war. Daniel sometimes wondered what would happen when the hidden fleets finally appeared. Would the galaxy see humans as monsters then, just as dangerous as they once thought? Would allies rise from among the stars, or would every alien turn in fear? It did not matter. For Daniel, only one thing mattered: Earth's survival. Humanity had to endure, no matter what anyone thought. On the Zeralon, he kept these thoughts to himself. If even one alien suspected he knew more than he should, his disguise would end. So he played the part, listening as commanders mocked Earth's defenses, as soldiers laughed about how quickly human colonies would fall. Inside, he smiled at their ignorance. They thought they were hunters, but in truth, they were walking into the den of a creature they could not understand. When he closed his eyes, he remembered his mother's words before he left Earth. They will think we are weak. Let them. That mistake will be their downfall. Daniel never forgot those words. Every time he saw the arrogance of the Coalition, he heard her voice again, and he knew she was right. Humanity's silence, its quiet patience, was the greatest disguise of all. The aliens believed humans had nothing. Daniel knew humanity had everything it needed: old ships, hidden fleets, secret weapons, and unbreakable hearts. The galaxy had forgotten Earth's history, but history never forgot humanity. And when the time came, when the signal was given, the sleeping giants would rise, and the galaxy would remember why humanity was never to be underestimated. The grand war chamber of the Coalition was a place built to impress and intimidate. It was carved into the side of a drifting station, a massive hall where the leaders of dozens of alien species gathered. The walls glowed with symbols of conquest, battles won across the stars, and the polished floor reflected the light of hovering orbs above. Around the long oval table sat generals, admirals, and counselors, each representing a species that had joined the alliance against Earth. Their voices filled the chamber, loud and arrogant, echoing like the growl of predators circling prey. Daniel, Cross, stood among them, silent, his posture calm and unshaken. To them, he was just another officer, one of their own, carrying reports and standing guard at the edge of the chamber. They never suspected that behind the alien face he wore, behind the disguise of flesh and tone, was a human spy listening to every word. Every sentence, every plan, every weakness, they poured into his memory like water into a vessel. He said nothing, but his silence was sharper than any weapon. The council debated how to destroy humanity. One alien general, his voice thick with contempt, demanded orbital bombardment of Earth's colonies. Burn their homes from the skies, he growled, slamming a clawed fist on the table. Let them see fire fall from the heavens. Humans will kneel if they watch their worlds turn to ash. Another counselor disagreed. Her species thrived on control, and she spoke of enslaving survivors instead. Do not waste them, she hissed, her silver eyes narrowing. Humans are clever enough to work, but not strong enough to rebel. Their bodies will serve as labor. Their children will grow knowing no freedom. That is how you truly end a species, not with death, but with chains. A third commander, proud and arrogant, laughed at both ideas. He wanted trophies. Take their leaders alive, he said with a grin full of sharp teeth. Parade them through the halls of our empire. Let every world see their weakness. Fear spreads faster than fire. The arguments grew louder, each species pushing its own vision of how to end humanity. None of them saw the danger in wasting time. None of them noticed the flicker of Daniel's eyes as he absorbed every detail. He knew their timetable now. He knew their invasion routes, their chosen targets, even the order in which they planned to strike. Every word they spoke was another weapon he could one day use against them. But Daniel also saw their weakness. The council was not united, not truly. Pride, greed, and hunger for power pulled them apart even as they tried to appear strong. One wanted Earth's resources, another wanted its people, and others only wanted glory. They called themselves a coalition, but Daniel could see it for what it was. A nest of predators who would fight each other the moment prey was gone. That was their flaw. That was the crack in the wall that he could shatter when the time was right. As the debates raged, Daniel stood still, his face unreadable. Inside, his human heart pounded. He wanted to scream at them, to tell them they were fools, to remind them that humanity had never bowed to tyrants, not in its long history. But he stayed silent. He knew the value of patience. One wrong word, and he would be dead before he left the chamber. At one point, the council leader, a towering figure with golden armor, stood and raised his voice above the noise. "We waste time with arguments. Humanity is fragile. Their fleets are small. Their defenses are weak. We strike Proxima first, then their colonies, then Earth itself. It will be over within weeks." His voice carried such certainty that the chamber fell quiet. Heads nodded, claws tapped on the table, and a ripple of approval spread through the council. They believed. Victory was already in their grasp. Daniel lowered his gaze to hide the faint smile threatening to form. Weeks, the alien leader had said. They believed humanity would fall in weeks. Daniel knew the truth. He had seen the old dreadnoughts hidden in the asteroid belts, the forgotten shipyards still humming with power. He knew humanity's silence was not weakness but preparation. When those sleeping giants awoke, weeks would turn into years and the coalition would bleed. He filed every plan into his memory. The target, Proxima. The timetable, soon. The strategy, overwhelming force, orbital, bombardment, no mercy. He would carry this knowledge like a flame, hidden but burning, waiting for the moment he could light the fire of resistance. The meeting dragged on, with more arguments about spoils, about who would command which fleets, about who would claim credit when Earth fell. Daniel listened, patient and still. Each word revealed more of their arrogance, more of their blindness. They did not fear humanity. That was their mistake, and it would destroy them. When the council finally adjourned, the chamber emptied into the echoing halls of the station. Daniel walked with the others, his steps calm, his face hidden behind the alien mask. But inside, his heart was steel. He had their plan now. He had their weaknesses. One man against an empire, one human against a coalition. But one was enough. Because patience, silence, and knowledge were stronger than all their weapons. Every alien believed the war was already won. Every alien believed humanity was fragile and doomed. But Daniel Cross knew the truth. He had stood in their war chamber, he had heard their arrogance, and he knew how to turn it against them. One mistake, just one, and he would set into motion a chain reaction that would shake the galaxy. They had welcomed him as one of their own, never suspecting he was the enemy they hated most. And in that mistake, they had already begun to lose. The Xyrelon drifted in silence, its massive engines humming low as the fleet gathered at the edge of Proxima. Around the ship, dozens of other vessels hung in formation, their sharp silhouettes glowing faintly against the stars. Inside, the crew prepared for war. Officers shouted orders, soldiers marched to their stations, and technicians calibrated weapons that could burn worlds. The air was filled with excitement, the kind of excitement predators feel before a kill. They believed this battle would be easy. They believed Proxima's human colony would fall in hours. Daniel Cross moved among them, his face calm, his alien disguise unbroken, but inside his thoughts raced. He had listened to their plans in the war chamber, and now he saw them being set into motion. Proxima was to be the first step, a test of fire before Earth itself. If the colony fell quickly, the coalition would gain even more confidence. If it survived, even for a little while, it would give humanity hope. Daniel knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. He had spent years gathering knowledge, years watching and memorizing. Now it was time to act. But he had to act carefully. One mistake could expose him, and if the crew discovered he was human, he would be dead before he could take a single step. The Xerolon's targeting systems were the pride of the fleet. With a single order, it could lock onto Proxima's defenses and tear them apart. Daniel knew that if the system worked as planned, the colony would be reduced to rubble within minutes. That could not be allowed. Quietly, while the officers were busy shouting commands, he slipped into the control room. His hands moved with practiced ease as though he belonged there. He rerouted power through false conduits, shifted command lines, and introduced subtle glitches into the targeting arrays. To any scanner, it looked like nothing but a minor fluctuation. But when the fleet entered battle, those glitches would grow into chaos. Next, he moved to communications. Coalition fleets depended on clear signals, orders sent from the flagship to every ship in range. Daniel knew if those signals were corrupted, ships would fire on the wrong targets, or ignore orders altogether. He tapped his wrist device against the panel, a silent connection activating his hidden codes. False commands slipped into the network like poison into blood. To the crews, they would sound real. To Daniel, they were the seeds of confusion. By the time he returned to his station, everything looked normal. No one had noticed. The officers barked their orders, soldiers strapped into their harnesses, and the fleet prepared to jump. Daniel sat quietly, his heart pounding, his mind sharp. The moment was close. When the fleet jumped into Proxima space, the stars blurred and snapped back into focus. Suddenly, the human colony filled the screens. Small defense frigates floated near the orbital station, their weapons armed but hopelessly, outmatched by the firepower surrounding them. On the ground below, faint lights flickered as colonists prepared for the nightmare descending from the sky. The coalition commander raised his arm. Fire! The Xerolon's lances roared to life, but instead of striking human ships, they spun wide, missing their targets completely. Another cruiser fired, but its beams slashed across the side of an allied vessel. Sparks erupted, alarms screamed, and chaos spread instantly across the fleet. "What is happening?" shouted the commander. Officers scrambled over consoles, their screens filled with error messages. Orders crackled over the comms, but half of them were distorted, half of them false. Some ships pulled back, others advanced, and still more opened fire blindly on anything in their sights. The neat, proud formation of the coalition dissolved into madness. For the first time, the humans fought with hope. Their frigates darted between the massive warships, firing concentrated blasts into exposed engines and shields. One by one, coalition ships exploded, victims of both human attacks and their own allies' crossfire. The human defense station lit up, its cannons striking deep into the heart of the confusion. Proxima had been expected to fall in hours, but instead the coalition fleet was being torn apart. Daniel kept his expression calm, even as his heart roared with triumph. His sabotage had worked. The predators had turned on each other, blinded by their arrogance. He knew this would not win the war, not yet, but it would prove something far more important. Humanity could fight back. On the bridge, the commander screamed orders, but no one knew which ones to follow. "Cease fire," some ships heard. "Advance," others received. Plasma blasts and disruptor beams crisscrossed the void, slamming into friend and foe alike. The once mighty coalition looked less like an army and more like a mob of beasts, tearing each other apart. Daniel's eyes flicked to the main screen where a small human frigate slipped through the chaos. It fired a railgun shot that cut clean through a coalition destroyer. For a brief second, Daniel imagined the cheers on that tiny ship, the hope in the eyes of those human pilots. They had no idea that a man among the enemy had given them this chance. They only knew that somehow they were winning. Lyra, the young officer who often watched him, turned toward Daniel, her silver eyes wide. This isn't possible," she whispered. "Why are our systems failing?" Her voice trembled. not with fear of humans but with doubt about her own people. Daniel looked at her for only a moment, then turned away. He could not let her see the truth. Not yet. The battle raged on. Coalition ships retreated in disorder, some fleeing the field entirely. Human frigates chased them, firing until their weapons overheated. By the time the fleet finally pulled back, the void was littered with burning wreckage. Proxima still stood. Humanity still stood. And the Coalition, for the first time, had tasted defeat. Daniel sat in silence as alarms blared around him. Officers shouted, commanders argued, and Lyra whispered questions to herself. He clenched his hands behind his back to keep from smiling. They would repair the systems. They would regroup. But the damage was done, not to their ships, but to their pride. They would never again see humans as helpless prey. And deep inside, Daniel knew the war had just begun. Smoke still lingered in the corridors of the Xyrelon after the battle at Proxima. Lights flickered overhead, systems groaned from the strain of sabotage, and the crew moved in frantic confusion trying to repair what had gone wrong. Everyone was tense. No one could explain how their mighty fleet had turned on itself, how the weapons that never failed had misfired so badly, or how human frigates had cut through them like wolves among blind cattle. To the Coalition, this was shame. To Daniel, Cross hidden in plain sight, it was triumph, but his victory came at a price. During the chaos of the battle, his disguise had slipped for the first time. It was not much. A glitch in the holographic projection that masked his human features, a brief flicker that revealed the sharpness of his jaw, the color of his eyes. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it was long enough. Lyra saw it. She had been standing just a few steps away on the command deck, her silver eyes wide as she caught the truth. For a moment she thought she had imagined it, but when she looked again, she knew what she had seen. Her fellow officer, the calm, one she admired, was not who he claimed to be. He was human. That realization struck her harder than the battle itself. For her whole life she had been taught that humans were dangerous, cunning, and savage. She had heard stories of their greed, their violence, their weakness disguised as boldness. She had believed, like the others, that humans needed to be destroyed before they became a threat. Yet here, standing before her, was Daniel, calm, steady, disciplined. He had saved lives on the ship before. He had never been cruel. He had earned her respect. If he was human, then everything she had been taught was a lie. Daniel noticed her staring. For a moment, their eyes met. She did not shout. She did not draw her weapon. She simply looked at him with confusion and something else. Hesitation. Daniel said nothing, his face calm, but inside his heart pounded. He knew if she spoke a single word he was finished, but she did not. She turned away, silent, carrying the weight of the truth alone. Later, in the quiet of the ship's lower decks, Lyra found him. The corridors were dim, filled with the low hum of damaged systems. She stopped in front of him, her voice low. "You're not one of us, are you?" she whispered. Daniel said nothing at first. He studied her face, trying to read her intentions. Then slowly, he shook his head. "I am human," he said softly. The words felt heavier than anything he had ever spoken. For the first time in years, he revealed himself not just with a flicker of failing disguise, but with his own voice. Lyra's breath caught. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you here? If they find out, they will kill you." Daniel hesitated. He could have lied, could have said anything to protect himself, but he saw the doubt already growing in her. He chose the truth. "Because my people are not weak," he said. "We have been preparing. You think Earth is helpless, but it is not. Hidden fleets, dreadnoughts in the dark, old weapons sleeping in silence. Humanity has been waiting. You will not destroy us. You cannot." Lyra's eyes widened as his words sank in. She thought of the battle, the chaos, the defeat the Coalition had suffered for the first time. Could it be true? Could humanity, the prey they had mocked, actually hold such power in secret? She remembered the human frigates darting through the fight, striking with precision, refusing to break. They had not looked like weaklings. They had looked like survivors. "I should report you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I should. Call the commander right now." "Then why haven't you?" Daniel asked calmly. His gaze was steady, unshaken, though his heart beat fast. "Because you've seen what your leaders are, cruel, arrogant, blind. You know what they want isn't justice, it's conquest. They fear what they cannot control. And you, Lyra, you've seen the truth." Her hands clenched at her sides. She hated that he was right. She had seen her own commanders laugh about burning colonies, about enslaving survivors, about crushing an entire species for nothing more than pride. It had always unsettled her, but she had buried the doubt. Now, standing before a human who risked everything just to survive among them, those doubts roared louder than ever. "What will happen now?" she asked. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was barely a breath. "What will happen is this. Humanity will rise. The fleets hidden in the dark will awaken. The dreadnoughts will come. The galaxy thinks we are weak because we are silent, but silence is not surrender. It is preparation. When the time comes, Earth will fight and your coalition will break." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence. Lyra's mind raced. Everything she believed was collapsing, but in its place grew something new. Fear, yes, but also respect. Finally, she whispered, "If they discover you, they will tear you apart." Daniel nodded. "Then you must decide," he said. "Do you stay loyal to a lie, or do you see the truth?" She stared at him, torn between duty and doubt, but she did not call for guards. She did not betray him. Instead, she turned and walked away, her thoughts heavy. That night, as the Zeralon limped away from Proxima, Daniel stood alone in his quarters. He knew his secret was no longer his alone. One alien now carried the truth. He did not know if she would protect him or expose him, but he sensed something had changed. For the first time, an alien officer had seen not just a human, but humanity's fire. The galaxy thought humanity was finished. The coalition thought victory was certain. But Lyra's hesitation told Daniel something powerful. Doubt had entered their hearts. And once doubt began, it was only a matter of time before fear followed, and fear could unravel even the mightiest empire. The news of the Proxima battle spread across human space like fire in a dry field. For the first time, the coalition had been forced to retreat, and for the first time, human survivors looked up at the stars with hope instead of despair. But the coalition was not finished. They gathered again, stronger, larger fleets determined to crush humanity once and for all. They wanted to erase the shame of their failure, to burn Proxima and every colony that dared to resist. They believed humans had been lucky, nothing more. They still thought of Earth as prey. What they did not know was that humanity was done hiding. Deep in the asteroid belts, long-forgotten ships began to awaken. The Terran dreadnoughts, massive war machines built in secret decades ago, were being brought back to life. Their hulls were scarred by time, but their cores were stronger than ever. Engineers worked day and night, unlocking systems no alien knew existed. When the first dreadnought powered up, the sound of its engine shook the very rocks around it. One by one, the giants of Earth rose from their slumber. They were not graceful like alien ships, not shining jewels of technology. They were heavy, brutal, and built for one purpose only: war. Daniel Cross had waited years for this moment. From his place inside the Zeralon, he watched through secret transmissions as the dreadnoughts came online. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with railguns the size of towers, missile silos hidden beneath armored plating, and shield breaker cannons designed to rip apart even the strongest defenses. Where alien fleets relied on elegance and speed, the Terran dreadnoughts relied on raw, unstoppable power. They were humanity's answer to extinction. When the coalition fleet advanced again, they expected an easy victory. Hundreds of ships surrounded the Proxima sector, their weapons primed, their commanders eager to reclaim their pride. They laughed at the small human frigates that darted before them. They thought this would be like swatting insects. But then the void trembled. Out of the darkness came the dreadnoughts. They moved slowly, like mountains tearing through the night, their shadows dwarfing even the largest coalition cruisers. Alarms rang out across alien ships as sensors lit up, detecting power signatures greater than anything they had ever seen. At first, some commanders thought it was a trick, some illusion created by desperate humans. But when the first dreadnought fired, the galaxy changed forever. A single railgun round, launched at impossible speed, tore through the shields of a coalition battleship and split it in half. A second dreadnought unleashed a storm of missiles that tracked and destroyed an entire squadron of strike craft before they could even respond. Plasma beams and disruptor fire rained down on the human giants, but their armor held. They kept moving forward, relentless, unstoppable. On the bridge of the Xyrelon, panic spread. Officers shouted, systems overloaded, and the commander's voice cracked as he tried to keep order. Daniel stood among them, hiding the fierce pride burning in his chest. This was what he had waited for. This was the moment when humanity revealed itself, not as prey but as a predator the galaxy had never imagined. Human frigates darted between the dreadnoughts, striking like wolves alongside giants. Together they carved through the coalition's armada. Every time an alien ship exploded, the morale of their fleet cracked further. What had once been arrogance now turned to disbelief, and disbelief quickly became fear. Across the galaxy, thousands watched the battle through broadcasts and reports. Species who had believed the coalition's lies now saw the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was strong, stronger than anyone had dared to believe. Whispers spread in the outer systems, questions that leaders could not silence. If humans could build such war machines in secret, what else were they capable of? Daniel's sabotage only added to the chaos. His false orders spread through the network, making coalition ships turn on each other once more. Confusion reigned. Some vessels tried to retreat, but the dreadnoughts blocked their path, striking with merciless precision. For the first time, the coalition understood what it meant to be hunted. Lyra stood nearby, her silver eyes wide as she stared at the human warships on the screen. She whispered softly, "They told us you were fragile. But this is power." Her voice shook with awe. Daniel did not answer. He simply watched, his fists clenched, his heart filled with both pride and sorrow. Pride, because his people had proven themselves. Sorrow, because he knew this was only the beginning. The battle stretched for hours, but the result was never in doubt. By the end, the void was filled with wreckage. Coalition ships fled in broken formations, their commanders shouting desperate orders to retreat. The Terran dreadnoughts held the field, their guns silent now but ready for the next war. Humanity had stood against an empire and won. The galaxy would never forget this day. Stories spread to every world. Some species trembled, others cheered, and many wondered if humanity might be a force worth following instead of fearing. The coalition had wanted to crush humans before they became a threat. Instead, they had awakened something far greater, a power that could no longer be ignored. On the Xyrelon, Daniel stood tall, knowing the war was far from over. But the tide had turned. Humanity had shown its teeth, and the galaxy had seen. No longer would Earth be dismissed as weak or fragile. From this day forward, the coalition would live with fear in their hearts, fear of the silent species they had once mocked. The rise of the dreadnoughts was not just a victory, it was a promise that humanity would never kneel, never surrender, and never again be underestimated. The battlefield around Proxima was quiet now, filled only with the drifting wreckage of destroyed ships. Pieces of broken cruisers spun through the void. Engines flickered like dying stars, and the silence of space pressed down heavy after the storm of war. Humanity had done what no one in the galaxy thought possible. They had stood against the coalition's might and forced it to retreat. The Terran dreadnoughts, scarred but unbroken, floated like mountains among the stars, their weapons still glowing from the heat of battle. For the first time, humans were no longer seen as prey, but as a force to be feared. On the Zeralon, chaos had become despair. The once proud flagship of the Coalition limped through space, its hull torn, its crew shaken. Officers whispered in, "Fear?" Soldiers looked around with hollow eyes, and the commander sat frozen on the bridge, unable to explain what had happened. None of them could believe it. Their entire lives they had been told that humans were weak, that Earth would fall in days, that victory was certain. And yet, here they were, defeated, humiliated, and terrified. Daniel Cross walked those same halls, silent as ever, blending in among them. His heart carried pride for his people, but he did not show it. He could not. To the crew, he was still one of them. If they knew the truth, if they realized a human spy had been the dagger in their heart, they would tear him apart without hesitation. But Daniel had lived this life for years, and he wore it now like armor. He was patience, he was silence, he was the ghost they would never see coming. Word spread quickly through the Coalition. Some species began to question their leaders. Whispers of rebellion slipped through their fleets. Why had they attacked humanity at all? Why had they wasted lives chasing prey that had turned into a predator stronger than themselves? Some species sent secret signals probing for peace, hoping to avoid humanity's wrath. Others broke away from the Coalition entirely, afraid of being dragged into another disaster. The once mighty alliance of predators began to fracture, cracks forming in the walls they had built together. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's victory had lit a fire in the galaxy. It would burn across systems, changing the balance of power forever. But he also knew the Coalition would not give up so easily. They would come again, larger fleets, harsher weapons, desperate to crush the rising fear. The war was far from over, yet it was no longer one-sided. Humanity had proven it could stand, and that was enough to change everything. Lyra walked beside him now, her eyes still haunted by what she had seen. She had not reported him. She had kept his secret, though she could not explain even to herself why. Perhaps it was the doubt in her heart, or the respect she had grown for him, or the quiet realization that everything she had been taught about humans was a lie. She had watched him during the battle, seen the fire in his eyes as the dreadnoughts rose, and in that moment she had understood. "You knew this would happen," she whispered to him when they were alone. "Yes," Daniel said simply. His voice was steady, but inside he carried the weight of years of silence and sacrifice. "I knew. I waited for it. And now the galaxy knows too." She stared at him, her silver eyes searching. "You are just one man, one human. How could you change so much?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Because sometimes one is enough, one to watch, one to learn, one to strike when the time is right. They wanted humanity's death, but they never realized a human was already among them, waiting." Lyra turned away, her thoughts heavy. She could feel the truth of his words, but she could not say them aloud. To admit it would be to betray everything she had ever believed. Yet in her heart, she knew he was right. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was strong, stronger than any of them had imagined. As the Zeralon drifted through the wreckage, Daniel stood at the viewport, looking out at the Terran dreadnoughts. They were far away, but he could see their outlines, massive and unyielding, against the stars. They were symbols now, not just of strength but of survival. Humanity had shown the galaxy that silence was not weakness, that patience was not surrender, and that one species, underestimated and mocked, could rise to shake an empire. The Coalition would come again. Daniel knew this. But he also knew something else. The galaxy had changed. Fear had entered the hearts of the enemy, and fear was a poison. It would spread, it would grow, and it would break them from within. He had lived among them, seen their pride, their arrogance, and their cracks. He knew how to push them until they fell apart. Every alien had once sought humanity's death. Every alien had believed Earth would burn, but now they would remember the battle at Proxima. They would remember the rise of the dreadnoughts. They would remember the human who had stood among them, silent and unseen, and changed the fate of the galaxy. Daniel Cross turned from the stars, his disguise still in place, his heart still heavy but unbroken. He was just one man, hidden in the enemy's ranks, but he had become something greater. A shadow, a symbol, a spark of earth burning in the darkest places. And as long as he lived, as long as he carried the fire of his people, the coalition would never be safe. The war was far from over. Battles still waited. But humanity had risen, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again.